Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am so pumped you're joining me today because we are going to unpack a truly fascinating science-backed look at the hidden relationship between our body fat and our chronic health. We hear about weight loss all the time in terms of outward appearances, right? But what's happening on a microscopic, cellular level is just so much more incredible and honestly way more important. We're going to visualize exactly how your body's chemistry transforms when you make metabolic shifts and how those shifts fight off one of the absolute biggest threats to our long-term health, inflammation. Okay, let's dive right into this. Think about it for a second. Do you actually need to hit your so-called ideal weight to get healthy? We are constantly bombarded with this overwhelming assumption that massive, dramatic physical transformations are an absolute requirement for internal health. Society kind of tells us that unless you hit some magical number on a scale, you aren't truly healthy. But today, we're going to look at the hard scientific data that completely challenges that. We're going to see how your body actually responds to changes, and the truth might just change the way you view health forever. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the inflammation villain, move inside the fat factory, look at the surprising 5 to 10 rule, go beyond the scale, and wrap it all up with the big picture. Let's get into it. Part 1, the inflammation villain, or the hidden danger. You know, while acute inflammation actually heals us, chronic low-grade inflammation is the hidden danger driving serious metabolic diseases. For decades, the old-school view was that body fat was just a passive storage depot, kind of like a giant biological suitcase where we just stuffed extra calories. But modern science has totally flipped the script on that. Adipose tissue, which is your body fat, is actually a highly active endocrine organ. It is constantly producing hormones and firing off chemical signals throughout your entire body, deeply influencing your metabolism and your immune system. It's not just sitting there, it's actively communicating. Moving to section 2, inside the fat factory, when cells expand and shrink. Let's zoom way inside the body to see what happens when visceral fat goes wrong. When this visceral fat tissue expands beyond healthy levels, it basically turns into a biological factory running completely in overdrive. The fat cells themselves, the adipocytes, physically swell up. And because they get so incredibly big, the local blood supply literally can't keep up. That means less oxygen, a massive spike in oxidative stress, and the cells essentially hit the panic button. This cellular panic draws in immune cells, specifically these scavenger cells called macrophages, which start piling up right there in the tissue. And as they gather, the production of inflammatory compounds starts skyrocketing. So, what exactly are those panic signals? They take the form of specific inflammatory molecules known as cytokines and adipokines. We're talking about tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 6, and monocyte chemoattractant protein 1. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful of scientific jargon, but just think of them as tiny inflammatory messengers. When your fat cells get stressed out, they dump these molecules directly into your bloodstream, which kicks off a state of chronic systemic inflammation everywhere in your body. This is exactly how excess visceral fat does its damage to your heart and vascular system. Now, since this fire is burning on a microscopic level, you might be wondering, how do doctors even know it's happening? Well, they look for biomarkers, specifically one called hsCRP, or high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. When those tiny inflammatory messengers we just talked about hit your liver reacts by churning out hsCRP. So, with just a simple blood test for this protein, scientists and your doctor can literally quantify the hidden inflammation hiding out inside you. But here's where the story gets super hopeful. There is this huge myth out there that when you lose weight, your fat cells just magically vanish or dissolve. Actually, scratch that, it's completely false. In reality, they deflate. As you burn stored energy, the cells shrink, and as they shrink, the cellular stress drops, allowing oxygen delivery to get back to normal. With the panic over, fewer immune cells pile up, and the production of those dangerous inflammatory cytokines simply plummets. You are quite literally shutting off that inflammatory factory just by shrinking the cells down. All right, section 3, the 5 to 10 rule, and the surprising math behind it. So, how much weight loss does it actually take to flip that switch and stop the cellular panic? Here is the absolute crucial point: 5 to 10%. That is literally it. You do not need to lose half your body weight to dramatically transform your internal chemistry. The scientific evidence consistently shows that dropping just 5 to 10% of your starting body weight triggers massive, measurable improvements in your blood pressure, your blood glucose control, your triglycerides, and all those inflammatory markers. Let's put that abstract percentage into some totally relatable math. If you're a 200-pound person, 5 to 10% means losing just 10 to 20 pounds. That is an incredibly attainable metric. Long before you'd ever hit some arbitrary ideal weight on a BMI chart, simply losing those 10 to 20 pounds shrinks the most stressed out fat cells, quiets down the macrophages, and cuts off the release of those inflammatory cytokines. Your health starts improving almost immediately. And once you hit that 5 to 10% mark, you kick off what scientists call a positive feedback loop. It's basically a domino effect. Excess fat causes inflammation, which blocks insulin from doing its job, a condition we call insulin resistance. But as you drop that modest amount of weight, you lower those inflammatory cytokines. With the inflammation clearing out, your cells become highly sensitive to insulin again. Because insulin is working better, your body lowers the amount of it in circulation, which brilliantly improves your overall glucose regulation. Better metabolic health lowers inflammation, and lower inflammation drives even better metabolic health. You're completely reversing the destructive cycle. Section 4. Beyond the scale. Looking at diet and exercise tools. Shrinking fat cells is fantastic, but your body has other amazing tools to fight inflammation that have absolutely nothing to do with your weight. Remember earlier when we said fat is an active endocrine organ? Well, guess what? So is your muscle. When you exercise, your skeletal muscles produce these amazing signaling molecules called myokines. These are absolute game changers. Myokines act as powerful anti-inflammatory signals that regulate your immune function and actually reduce systemic inflammation completely regardless of whether you've lost a single pound. So every single time you're physically active, whether it's a brisk walk, a bike ride, or lifting weights, your muscles are actively pumping anti-inflammatory medicine right into your bloodstream. And diet quality matters just as much as calorie counting. Whole food, plant-based diets are heavily linked to lower inflammation. Why is that? Because they are absolutely loaded with fiber, polyphenols, carotenoids, and flavonoids. These are your heavy hitter antioxidants. By eating nutrient-dense foods, you're basically sending in chemical reinforcements to directly neutralize the oxidative stress happening inside those fat cells, bringing down your overall inflammation levels. And this brilliantly highlights one of the coolest mechanisms in the entire human body. When you eat fiber from plant-based foods, you aren't actually digesting it yourself. Your gut bacteria are fermenting it for you. And when they do, they produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate keeps your intestinal barrier strong and directly dampens inflammatory signaling across your entire body. So keeping your gut microbiome well-fed with high-quality fiber is a direct, measurable way to put out that inflammatory fire. Finally, Section 5, the big picture. To truly create a resilient internal environment, we have to look at the holistic roadmap. Think of this as your ultimate holistic toolkit. Getting enough sleep directly lowers cortisol and stress hormones that would otherwise fan the flames of inflammation. Then there's stress management. Chronically high mental stress physically turns on inflammatory pathways, so calming your mind literally calms your body's chemistry. Physical activity perfectly regulates your immune function. And diet quality fights off oxidative stress right down at the cellular level. Notice how all of these pieces work together in perfect harmony to lower inflammation completely independent of the scale. And here is genuinely the most exciting part of this entire explainer. Your body wants to heal. Studies show that the second you start applying these changes, getting a bit more sleep, moving a little more, eating some extra fiber, measurable changes in inflammatory markers like hsCRP start happening in just a matter of weeks. It is incredibly fast. And if you keep it up, those greatest improvements compound over months as your body fat stores slowly decrease and your metabolic health fully stabilizes. All of this builds right to our core takeaway for today. Consistency matters far more than perfection. You do not need to starve yourself. You definitely don't need to overtrain. Small daily tweaks, an extra serving of veggies, a 20-minute walk, maybe 30 minutes more sleep, or dropping just 5% of your body weight, repeated over time, will give you massively bigger long-term benefits than some miserable extreme crash diet ever could. So we'll leave it there with this final thought. We now know for sure that every single pound lost physically shrinks stressed out fat cells, shuts down their panic signals, and fundamentally upgrades your cellular chemistry for the better. The power really is completely in your hands. Knowing how incredibly fast your body responds to just a little bit of help, what small change are you going to make today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious out there, and I will catch you in the next one.